us. So welcome everybody to this Business Education Special Interest Group webinar from ASCILITE. We're glad to have you here. I'm one of the committee members, Amanda White from the University of Technology, Sydney, and we have a great team here from Otago who are here to tell us about live clients and the business aspect of things. So we're always interested in how we can improve business education through the use of technology. We know that we have very large cohorts. We have students with many different motivations for studying at university or in higher education. And right now, we have students all over the world, which creates its own challenges. Now, just a reminder to everybody today that our webinar today is being recorded, as well as the chat. We ask everybody to keep their microphones muted, except for our presenters. And I'll get into our presenters in just a moment. But this will be recording will be available. If you've not used Collaborate Ultra before, on the right-hand side of your browser, there's a little purple tab down in the bottom right corner. You can click that to access the chat panel, and you can send a chat message. You can tag certain people. So if you have questions for our presenters, please do add them in the chat, and I will interject at an appropriate moment to ask that of the team. But we've got 1 hour today, so we're going to have a presentation for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll open it up to Q&A and hear from, today we also have some great students with us as well who are going to be providing their perspectives, which I think is really, really important in our current learning environment to make sure that we're always considering that student perspective. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Audrea, who's going to do a little introduction and tell us a little bit about this conundrum of whether to use live clients or not to use live clients. Take it away.
Thanks, Amanda. Just one little quick check and correction. We're from the University of Auckland. We love the University of Otago.
Bugger. I'm sorry.
Right. But I just wanted to put that in there. And thank you very much, Amanda, for your very warm welcome. And I hope that we can really give everybody a perspective of what we've done with the idea of live client. So to use live client or not to use live client, that is the question. So before we begin, I would like to start with a karakia. It is an important thing in Maori custom, and Maori people are the Indigenous people of New Zealand, so it's very important that we acknowledge that. So we're starting with the following karakia. Whakatata te ho ki te uru. Whakatata te o ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina te uta. Kia mā taratara ki tai. E he ake ane atakura. E tio, he huka, he hohanga. Ho mai, huye, tai kie. Translate, the wind swings to the west, then turns into a southerly, making it prickly cold inland and piercing cold on the coast. May the dawn rise red-tipped on the ice, on snow, on frost. Join, gather, entwine. And I particularly like the last part of join, gather, and entwine. So let us all join now over the course of the next 20 so minutes and explore this idea of live clients. So what are we going to be looking at for the next bit? I want to give you the reasons for using live clients. So what's kind of in the literature will also be explored in regard to the gap between theory and application. The value of experiential learning, and there's a lot of different ways that we as educators are using experiential learning, and using live clients and group projects is another way of really providing our students with those other key concepts and also key skills that they're going to really need once they actually go from the university and tertiary setting into the wider business environments. We're going to look at the marketing context of the course that we're actually also taught and have been teaching, and looking at the advantages not just for ourselves as staff but also for the students. What's the value that they're getting from it? And also, as comes with everything, with the advantages come the challenges as well, and we'll be exploring those today. So, what are the reasons for using live clients? There's a lot of literature in this area that's been sort of growing probably from about the early to mid 2000s to now. And both practitioners and academics are kind of saying the same thing. There's that gap between the theory and application. And I've had many conversations with practitioners in the New Zealand marketing context, especially, who've said, look, what our students are actually coming into these jobs, these entry-level marketing roles, and they just don't seem to have all those skills that they need. Courses have more emphasis on theory than on practical application. We're trying to give them all those key concepts and ideas, but it's that application, that practical side that's missing. Sorry, I think that's just, oops. More employers are seeking professionals that have developed the ability to identify the problem and seek relevant data and information, which is really important. That ability to go out and look for ways to solve something, analyze, interpret data, make a decision, and in essence solve real world problems. And this is again that idea of the real client, providing something that's real, actually happening in that moment and is unfolding. Educators are striving to bridge that gap between theory and practice by providing students with opportunities to apply those theoretical concepts to real world situations. That literature gap that we talked about a moment ago was really highlighted by Stern and Singh in 2002, that really verified that gap between theory and application. And it's not just within the marketing discipline, it's in a number of disciplines, and it's across accounting, HR, marketing information systems, production operation systems. I think if you look across the board at sort of all the different things that are offered, each one of those subject areas is finding that challenge, and marketing is not isolated in this. Writers have also identified in their research that live client projects can reduce this gap in that practicing and also having that theoretical understanding. It's that bringing that real gap and bringing that bridge across is really, really important. So what's the value of this experiential learning? Traditionally, we've always sort of done, and this was now kind of seen as prehistoric, but there are still elements of this in our teaching where we are really providing and delivering a mode of content to our students. And it's sort of seen as sometimes that passive learning method. It's not stimulating that creative thinking and communication skills. We are, however, trying different things, whether that's group projects, whether that's simulations, which I do in some of the other courses that I run, and bringing in actual industry experts to talk about the projects that they've actually talked and worked on. Experiential learning is an engaged learning process where students learn by doing. And it's by reflecting on that experience. And that's why I think it's really important that at the end of this presentation, we really hear about some of those reflections and the journeys that some of these students have actually been on. And 3 of my ex-students are here to discuss those experiences. Experiential learning also helps foster critical thinking and that problem-solving skills. It's really taking that idea, concepts, and that thinking that you've, how do we unpack this problem? How do we see it from the perspectives of multiple stakeholders? And how do we make sure that the solutions are going to be applicable for everyone? So I will continue now. I want to give you kind of a marketing context here. The idea of marketing as an applied discipline is now through practice that's becoming more and more common. But when we look at marketing as the actual definition, marketing is the activity set of institutions and processes for creating and communicating, delivering and exchanging offerings that are value, and like I said before, for those multiple stakeholders. So that's for the customers, the clients, the partners, and society at a large. So how does this literature, it sounds great, it looks amazing, but how does this kind of is packaged or framed within the particular course that I've been teaching on? The course is a marketing course. It's a postgraduate level course. It's one of the first marketing papers that our students do within a Master of Management program where they can specialize in marketing. There's this live client-based project in this course. The course runs for a 10-week time frame, so it's a very tight time frame, and we have normally approximately about 45 students. We've sort of gone up to about 50 before, but predominantly it's about 45 students. Now, looking at that student body, they're predominantly international students and predominantly from Asia, so that's the kind of area, or that's the kind of demographic that we are dealing with. So for lecturing staff, we have, in this instance in this course, we liaise with potential live clients and select a suitable live client project. Now, this can take quite a bit of time, and I will go through that in a moment about the challenges and the advantages of that. We've dealt with a mixture of both multinational companies as well as those that are more domestic. In the last probably 3 iterations of the course, so the last 3 times that it's been run, we've had more of a New Zealand focus because of course with the lockdowns, and we've also tried to help companies that are within the New Zealand ecosystem, but also those that have been finding it challenging within the New Zealand ecosystem. So we've helped tourism operators such as Watch Kaikoura. We've helped the likes of Eden Park, who of course in the lockdowns and couldn't have like the 30,000 people that could come to watch a rugby game or attend another event there. We create, as the teaching staff, we create an outline that gives the client's marketing communication problem. So that's the problem that the company is actually facing. We give this to a student in a document. We give them a little bit of the history of the company, and we get them to kind of do a SWOT analysis. So they look at the strengths and the weaknesses of that particular company at the time that they get their brief. And then from that, we ask them to come through and start over that 10-week period, have board meetings with us. And in those board meetings, they discuss with us the different things that they're looking at doing. So they set a budget. The budget might be something like $50,000, and they need to kind of work around that, and basically go through and have a look and see what are the ways that they're going to pick a customer market. And then from that, what's their campaign overall concept going to be? And we give them feedback over the course of those 10 weeks. My apologies. To understand the rationale for selecting to use a live client-based group project, we need to explore what live client-based learning looks like from the student and from the educator perspective. And that's what we'll go through now. So what are these advantages? For students' benefits include the idea that the project can be an exciting project. It's novel each time it's a different client, and therefore it leads to more engagement and more intellectual stimulation, because it's something that's very much there. It's not in a textbook. It's not a case study that they're kind of looking at something that doesn't actually have a face or a value. They're actually engaging with real people, with a real organization, with producing real tangible outputs that are going to have an impact. Students from the course get the skills that business consider to be intrinsically valuable. So these include the ability to conceptualize and do market research, which is really important. Just because a company gives you a problem, sometimes you might find other issues as well associated with that problem. And we've had this scenario happen before. And from that, you can have some very unique outputs come through it. The idea here also is that they need to be able to collect, analyze, and interpret the data. So it's not just about creating an integrated marketing communication plan. It's also about saying, well, how are we going to evaluate it? We don't want students just to think, okay, I'm going to spend $50,000 doing posters, billboards, and so forth. How do you know your campaign has actually been successful? So how do you interpret that in terms of, is it clicks through a website? Is it the number of people that are now buying your product or service? And then in that way is attractive to the client. So they have to present these findings, and that's a couple of things happen in that presentation side of things. They have to actually create a video, and they have to go through and explain the whole process of what they've been through. They need to talk about the SWOT analysis that they've done. They need to also consider and make a 30-second ad. Now, that's not part of their budget, but they need to be creative in that. So they're also learning how to use different media tools as well. And I think that's also ties into the next slide, because sometimes that can be a challenge as well. So if we look here at the advantages of client-based project for staff, it enables us to keep a finger on the pulse. What's happening out there in the marketing world? What are the emerging trends and the practices? And secondly, working with live clients lets staff create more diverse networks. I know for myself personally that if I hadn't had these opportunities of engaging with the likes of the CEO of Eden Park or Whale Watch Kaikoura, that wouldn't have broadened the other networks that I have in those sectors as well. And it also provides opportunities and ongoing opportunities for students who might want to work in those sectors. So if somebody says to me, do you know a contact at Eden Park, or do you know someone at Whale Watch Kaikoura, or somebody in the tourism sector, that I'm able to use those networks to help leverage my students' further development into their own personal careers. Thirdly, working with live clients enables us to, as staff, to work in building those relationships with businesses who are key external stakeholders. Sometimes these particular live clients will then come back and talk at presentations to our students. And that creates a nice segue in terms of showing students what and who we've worked with previously. And when we're trying to get students to think about our specialisation, it's also a good way. All right, so along with those wonderful advantages come some, of course, challenges. And for students, there have been a few things that have crept up over the time that I've been teaching on this paper. And some students in the evaluations that we have, the student evaluations that we're given at the end of the 10 weeks, have noted that they find the project quite overwhelming. And that's a very important thing that we've kind of made changes over the last couple of iterations in terms of providing a clearer brief and trying to make students have more board meetings. Before it was kind of a one at the beginning and one at the end, and now we kind of have that more spaced out so that they can have more touch points with us and feel more confident in what they're actually going to deliver at the end of the program. The other thing is that there's a considerable time pressure to complete each phase of creating the integrated marketing communication plan. So while working with a live client is great, that 10-week time frame and trying to make sure that that fits around all the other assessment components that you've got, trying to also make sure that students are getting the right concepts and ideas early on so that they can start applying them into that assessment. Something I didn't actually highlight very clearly, and I should have, is that this actual project initially was worth about 40%. We've taken it down to 30%. The reason for moving it to 30% is because now students also have a 10% component where they do an individual reflection about the process and the journey that they've been on. What are the things that they've learned from working with live clients in a group project situation, and what are the skills that they've acquired as well? So that's another change that we've made. Live client projects require students to apply those concepts and ideas, as I mentioned, in the IMC at a high professional standards. And sometimes, and I know my 3 wonderful students here, they produce some amazing pieces of video recordings, which I wished I could have shared in this particular session, but I will, and I'll get Eric to maybe post his at the end in there, is that sometimes it can be really daunting for students, especially in that first week. I show them the live client brief, and then I show them this is what your previous cohort did, and they kind of sit there going, oh my gosh, like, how are we going to do that? So it's a matter of also kind of unpacking it into their mind that this is, yes, this is a high standard, but you just need to break down the task into smaller bite-sized pieces. And we do that and work with them in our team-based learning times that we have. It was noted by students that their early motivations were lost if the live client business was something that the students did not like. And I did see this in one instance. I was working with another academic, and she had selected a company that were selling nutritional supplements, and it was somebody that she knew. So she decided that she wanted to go ahead with this company as a live client. Well, the students were really excited because they'd seen the previous group had actually worked with mobility dogs, and then they saw theirs, and then the motivation just completely deflated at that moment. The idea was that the students were like, oh, it's not a really exciting one, I can't really relate to it. They warmed up as they got to meet the entrepreneur and hear his story and things, but yes, that can also be challenging if it's not something that the student can relate to or is passionate about. The responsiveness of the client can impact how quickly teams can work, and slow responses can lead to time pressure. So if we're waiting for a live client to actually give us feedback about something that the team might want to know about, for example, have you done this before? And that takes another week before they get around to responding to us, that can be very challenging, because sometimes the students are sort of the second half of their quarter and they're thinking, I really want to get this done, but I'm in a stop-start situation. Finally, students have added competition of having their final submissions judged by a panel of leading industry experts, and this can be daunting. So what we had initially pre-COVID was that we would actually have industry experts coming into the session at the very end of the course, and they would watch the presentations. The students would leave the room, and then they would provide feedback, and there would be categories such as best 30-second ad, best integrated IMC campaign, and etc. So that brings an additional level of, oh my goodness, we want to do our best as well. So what are the challenges for lecturing staff? I think one of the big ones is finding suitable live clients, and this begins months in advance. Sometimes when the paper has been offered twice in a year, trying to find 2 clients can be really challenging. Sorry, one moment. Oh, my apologies. So that can be really, really challenging for us. We had an instance where we had a client come in. They said that they were really keen to be involved, and exactly a week out they pulled, and that was hard. We were sending emails, we were trying to go through all our networks, we were getting other university staff involved. We have a liaison person, a university liaison person by the name of Chris Mullen. She's amazing. And she said, look, I'll go back to my networks and I'll find somebody else. And she did, but just the stress of it can be very, very daunting. Other challenges related to setting clear expectations for the student and the live client, letting the students know that this is what we're doing. Please don't keep bombarding the live client with what your questions, they go through me. So sorry about this. Each team meets the lecturing staff for one-on-one board meetings. One of the things that I did find challenging was that you'll have some teams, of course, that really want to meet with you every week, and others that just want to meet with you once or twice. And I think Eric's team was one of these, and then they were often on their way. But for the others that wanted to constantly meet, it means having a class session and then having more office hours as well. So that can be quite demanding over the course of those 10 weeks for staff. And we're constantly giving feedback, which is really important. Sometimes the challenge is that some students won't take the feedback, some of the groups, and then you're kind of letting them kind of go on their own, and they've got to take that as that's the decision that they've made, which can be quite challenging when you're thinking, oh, we've got a industry panel coming in, you know, we want you to do well, but you're kind of not listening to our feedback. So that was a bit of a challenge over some quarters that we've run this. What I really love is the live client feedback, and I think this is probably a really good example of this. Now, this was from Lisa Bond, who's at Wellwatch Kaikoura. We had them this time last year. We had been in a number of lockdowns, and we approached Lisa and said, look, would you like us to create an integrated marketing communication campaign for your organization? Wellwatch Kaikoura is in the South Island. It is in Kaikoura, and it is well known and well regarded. But one of their biggest challenges was that a huge portion of their client base is international customers, and that international base just vanished with the lockdowns. So here they were on national television saying, look, we're finding this time really challenging. And so I approached them and said, would you like us to do this? And this was what she came back with at the end of the quarter. What a gift to sit and watch through these videos. It is clear that each group have put in lots of hours and work into these presentations. All thought has gone into each group's marketing, social media plans has been so great to read, and there are so many great ideas among your presentations that give me and my colleagues much to think about. And then she goes on and she thanks the graduate school and the marketing course, and that they were able to share the vision of the company, the values, and so forth. I was really touched to receive this, but this is the kind of feedback that we've been getting with those live clients and with the experiences that our live clients have from working alongside our students. They really see the value of it, and they see the development from just getting a brief and just getting some points to the creative side that comes out from these students. So what about the student feedback? I had nicely highlighted this, but it wouldn't play nice with me. So the particular areas that I wanted to really draw to your attention were the following. Assessment supported the aims of the course. And this is the idea that this particular live client project is around about, as I said, it's previously been 40, now it's kind of a 30-10 split. But the idea here is that it's there and structured in such a way that the students are constantly building, and it's really well scaffolded, and we're getting that in the feedback that the students are giving. The other area here that I find really, really important is that the course is intellectually stimulating. We don't want our students to fall asleep. While concepts and ideas are really important, working alongside live clients provides them with that ability to, on their feet, problem solve real life problems that are unfolding for an organization who's finding it challenging. So I think that kind of provides a snapshot. I have indicated that in 2020 we were affected by the lockdowns. We were constantly going in and out, and that made it quite challenging. And I think one of the biggest disappointments was that one of our particular cohorts had a really good run where we had all our lectures and everything, but then we couldn't get the industry experts to come and actually see their presentations, and instead had them emailed to them. So that was a bit disappointing, but still it was a good experience overall. And then I just want to give you a few snapshots of some of the student feedback that we've got over the last few quarters. And some have said the live client project was the best assessment in the entire degree. Live client project was very helpful and realistic to what we need to achieve in the real world. And the live client experience provided me with hands-on experience on real problems and finding the skills, providing real solutions. Thank you. So I think that really shows the value there. But before I stop, I'm going to hand it over to my wonderful 3 students that are here. And so I think I'll start with Angela. Angela, would you be able to turn on your camera?
Hello.
Hey, Angela. So I'll just start with a couple of very quick, broad questions so you can talk about your experience. But overall, could you just give us an indication of the live client that you had? And also, what were the things that you found really challenging, and what were the things that you have found beneficial or got out of the experience and taken forward?
So the live clients that I worked with was Whale Watch Kaikoura. I think all 3 of us worked with Whale Watch Kaikoura for that project. Yeah, so as you mentioned, their problem was that they were losing tourists, international tourists, which is their biggest base. But so you have to kind of expand their domestic audience. So it was an interesting problem and very, very relevant. I think that was really inspiring because the problem was so new and COVID was just happening. So it was really fun. But the challenge, I think, for me was doing it all in 10 weeks with a new group of people like, that I hadn't worked with. Though I think 10 weeks, though it seems short, I think it's enough time to come up with a plan with your group, especially because in the real world, you might not even have 10 weeks. You might even have like 3 weeks or I don't know, less maybe. But yeah, so that just, there's a little pressure there, but a good kind, I guess. Um, what I liked about it is that having no work experience in New Zealand, and I plan to work here, it was a good chance for me to get a glimpse of like how a New Zealand company works. Not all companies work the way they do, but maybe getting to know as well like how the New Zealand consumer is like, the New Zealand target markets, just getting into that headspace. That's what I liked about it too. Yeah, as Audrea mentioned as well, like I think it puts you in that mindset that it's not just a school project, it's actually an opportunity to um, create a marketing plan that really, it changes your perspective when you have a live client or versus when you just choose a company and then you try to look for a problem. Yeah. So that's what I liked about it. That's all.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Angela. Eric, what was your experience?
So I think overall, like I totally agree with Angela's point because as an international student, I think this project is literally the first project that I have some hands-on experience to actually design a marketing campaign for New Zealand companies. So that's definitely really, really helpful for me to having that understanding about how I can leverage my previous marketing experiences and actually support or help the New Zealand businesses to further leverage their marketing efforts. I think the part that I feel a little bit challenging is definitely with the limited budget that the client or the product set. It's sometimes a little bit challenging for you to choose what is the right focus for the overall campaign because there are just so many channels and so many things that you can do around with it, but with the limited resources that the client have and the limited budget, it's really create that challenge, but also help us to further narrow our ideas down to see what is the truly important thing for the client or how we can leverage the small resources that we have, but helping them to solve that big problem. So I think these are definitely the 2 points that I really enjoyed.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Adelie, what was your kind of key takeouts from this and moving into your current marketing role as well? You're on mute.
Sorry. I feel like this particular project was a good way to kind of put into practice some of the theories that we've learned in class. And, you know, what I realize is we don't always have to follow every single theory. Sometimes you have to be able to be flexible, understand some of the feedback you get from your lecturers or from the boardrooms or from the customer or the client, and be able to accommodate for some things that they want. And so I found that really, really good experience. And I think in terms of this particular project, it made me realize that you can't take everything at face value. So it was really important for us to say, okay, cool. So the problem is obviously they've lost a lot of sales because there are a lot of international customers that have now are not able to come into New Zealand. But what really is the problem, and trying to figure out what the solution is. Obviously, the initial solution is, oh, let's just promote it to domestic tourists, but there's more than that, and trying to understand, you know, what domestic tourists we want to target, how do we target them, how do we successfully target them. I think that's probably another key take that I kind of take away from this project that has helped me in my current role.
Fantastic. Anything else that you guys want to add? Otherwise, I think we will probably wrap it up soon. No?
I have a question
Okay.
for you,
Okay.
at what size do you think that this would become more difficult? With how many students do you think this becomes a more difficult process?
I think probably with about 100 to 150, it's probably getting to be quite a difficult process. The reason I say that is if it's just a one lecturing teaching team with a GTA, for example, you're trying to do multiple board meetings. And I know from the course that all of these guys have been on, where we also use a simulation where we do board meetings, that you're just kind of running out of hours in the day. And just, yeah, and also just in terms of the demands that you might be putting onto the live client, they might be thinking, oh God, this is not what I signed up for. So that's becomes more of a balancing act at that, I think, that stage. I think somewhere between 50 and 75, you could still manage it quite nicely. But yeah, anything more than that, it's getting a little bit more difficult. Or, and this is something that I did want to try, but I think, again, I think you need a bigger teaching team, is to have multiple live clients. And then you can actually kind of tailor to what people might actually want or what they're interested in, rather than saying, right, we're just doing this one. Give them an option of maybe 2 or 3 and say, you choose the live client, these are the briefs. But yes, that brings its own complexities into that.
Complexity, yeah. We have marketing capstones at UTS where, applied market research, and there is, a line out the door of companies who basically want free market research and will use our students to do it. But it's managing all of those different partnerships, people in the queue. When are we going to be next? We weren't happy with the team that we got. So it's very interesting that there's one client and all these students. Obviously, the other way to go is, multiple clients and, potentially each client matched to a specific student group, which has its own risks, especially if the student group isn't that great. And I see it a lot in management and in marketing. But I think one of the areas where we probably don't do enough live client work is that accounting and finance side of things, where we have 1,800 students in first year accounting, and I think, wow, if we were trying to do something live, how would we make that work with so many students? And sometimes it's adaptations. Another way that you could consider using a live client is using snapshots of real businesses as part of exemplars and cases and that type of thing. Because I have a former student of mine who is a social media megastar and has his own burger brand. He has a collaboration with KFC. He's got all of this stuff going on. And, we have 5 lectures. I can't necessarily ask him to come to 5 lectures to talk to students. And so it's also trying to figure out ways that we can do this with technology that works really well as well. So, Audrea, with the students and their collaboration or their work, are you providing them with a specific platform, like is it Google Docs or Microsoft Teams or something for them to collaborate, or do they sort that out themselves?
They tend to sort them out. I think all of you kind of tended to sort it out yourselves. I think I was sort of trying to steer you towards the Google Docs, and I think some teams did, but others who'd worked with other platforms such as MS Teams and things like that and are familiar with that would kind of steer that way. We wanted, in most of these cases of Angela, Adelie and Eric, is that we said to them, keep meeting minutes, and they were kept in that Google Doc form. So yeah, I think predominantly we've kind of stuck
contemporaneous to that. Notes. Yeah, it could be important when we're trying to help students manage that group work aspect as well. Now, brings me to the other thing. I don't know, obviously you've got your best students here and they worked, well within their teams. Teamwork doesn't always go so smoothly. So in these types of situations, do the students get much training on working in a group, solving conflict? How do you address a client? Sometimes obviously we get emails like, hey, yous, how yous doing? In which I'm like, oh, hang on a second, let's work on some business professional English. Did the students get any crash courses in how to work as a group?
So these students, especially in the marketing program that in the business management that we've got, they have a business communication team that runs parallel with all the courses. So they will have seminars weekly which they can attend and which kind of go through protocols and different ways of kind of approaching presentations, written reports, that kind of thing. So that's kind of a little bit taken out of our hands, which is a nice thing. But also we know that they've also had experiences working in teams in that core stage one or sort of core papers that they do. The one thing that was different with putting these guys into teams is that they actually put an application form in. And what I tried to do was give them at least one person that they worked well with and identified that they worked well with, and tried to keep them not away, but if they were people that they really didn't want to work with or found very challenging, that they weren't in the same teams. So that takes a little bit of time, but it's definitely worth it. We have had situations where teams have started to fall apart. We had one situation where a team fell apart on the day of the presentation because some of the slides one person had put in were no longer there. And that was a bit humiliating because the live client was kind of sitting there as somebody ran out the door in tears. So we've had it all sorts, but I think you learn from that. And that's why we moved to kind of saying, okay, give me one person that's going to work for you. And yeah, we'll go with that. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right.
I just wanted to add
Angela.
in the theme of group works and professionalism. For the class we did with Audrea with the live client, we were also asked to kind of apply for different positions. So one person was a creative director, another one media planner, and so on. So you kind of had that feeling also that you had a real role in this team, in this marketing team. So I think that might have helped us as well feel more professional.
That's really great. A great idea to have that clear delineation. Whose responsibility? Well, I don't do group work anymore, but we've seen other things where, you set out how frequently is the group going to communicate? What are the tools that we're going to use? If you can't get something done by a certain time, how do you convey that to the group? And one of the things that I always tell my students is really important is that group work works smoothly when students get to know each other a bit, and you're not just some other person in my group, but I know you've been having a hard time at home, or that you're struggling with this other assessment that I did in a different subject, the same subject last semester. And so the more groups can get to know each other socially, also the stronger those groups can become and the more efficiently they can work as well. So I think we had, what was on the last slide? Audrey, I'm just going to go back to the slide.
Oh, that was just a thank you, I think.
Okay,
yes.
Hang on. Is it going to take me to the first slide again? No. Oh, hang on.
No,
I can go back to the very end. There we go. So a big thank you to the team from the correct university this time, the University of Auckland. I am dolt of the day for saying that, but a big thank you to our student presenters, our academic Audrea Warner as well. Thank you so much. Audrea's on the team, the Business Education Executive Committee with myself. And, this is really about creating authentic assessment experiences, authentic active learning, hands-on learning, which I think we've always been pretty big in the business world. And, authentic assessment is really starting to catch up to things that we've been doing quite a lot of, but looking at the challenges associated with working with live clients. How do we balance that authenticity with the practicalities, especially when subjects and cohorts can become quite large? So I want to thank everyone who was here today, to our student panel, to our staff, to the people who are watching on the recording later. You can get in touch with us if you have any other questions. Our next SIG webinar is going to be, I believe, on the 6th of September. And it's going to be myself and Danielle Logan from Griffith University. And it's going to be on students as partners. And we're doing this from a really exploratory perspective. So I'm really keen to learn more about students as partners, try to navigate how we start. I'm so keen on the idea of students as partners, but I don't even know where to start the process. So we've got some great guests coming along, and there'll be more posted about that online as we get closer. So thank you very much. I hope you're having a safe time wherever you are, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.